Alcalde, muchas gracias por acompañarnos hoy aquí en el semanario y en esta entrevista. Primero quiero preguntarle cómo afectan las políticas federales actuales de inmigración a los esfuerzos que está haciendo Denver como ciudad santuario, especialmente en lo que respecta a la protección de las familias inmigrantes.
Well, thank you so much for the question, and thank you for having me. The short answer is no part of the federal executive actions are going to change any part of our values in Denver or our laws or how we support our families. We are proud to be a welcoming city. We will continue to be a welcoming city, and we're going to do everything we can to help the families that are here be successful. We've laid out a bit of our approach to how we're going to interact with the new administration, and we've said a couple of things. One is we will work together collaboratively with them on removing violent criminals from our city, as we have done in the past with past administrations, as we will do in the future. That's unchanged. However, we are not going to do ICE's job for them. We are not federal immigration enforcement. We're not going to be federal immigration enforcement. We won't help on raids. We won't support raids here in the city. That's critically important. And equally important, we think that it is essential that Denver have protected spaces where people know they are safe. That means hospitals and churches and schools. We think folks should be able to go to those places and not worry for their safety or worry that they'll be somehow detained. And so we will oppose any effort to send ICE agents to those locations. And we also believe that those people that are in protected status, those folks that have applied for asylum and are waiting a court date, those folks who have entered through Customs and Border Protection 1 or have temporary protective status, we think those folks should not be subject to enforcement, and we will oppose any effort to do that. And mostly, we will oppose any effort to separate families or leave children orphaned here in the city by ICE actions. We'll be prepared to help support families when that happens, but we think that is not what our city needs or what the country needs.
¿Y qué desafíos enfrenta su administración al implementar esas protecciones frente a posibles represalias o recortes de fondos?
Yeah, I think that we believe that our policies are in accordance with federal law and state law and local law. We're going to follow all three of those. We have in the past. We will going forward. We don't ask anyone's status whenever they're stopped by a Denver police officer. We don't ask where they're from or what their nationality is or what their citizenship status is. And we don't share that information because we don't have it. So if the government calls and asks us for citizenship status, we won't share it because we don't know it. We don't ask it. We don't think it's important to ask. So we will not do that. But that's in keeping with federal law. And so we think that every Denver resident is a taxpayer and they deserve to share in the taxpayer revenue of the federal government the same way any other state does. So we would oppose in court any effort to reduce funding to Denver because of our welcoming status. But we also think it's clear that our current practices don't violate federal law, don't interfere with federal actions, and there's no reason why we should be targeted for reduction of funds.
Quiero preguntarle cómo está abordando el temor que los inmigrantes tienen a ir a las escuelas, a ir a las iglesias y todo lo que en general, pues, se viene gestando desde la administración actual.
Yeah, we know that people are afraid right now and they're uncertain about what's going to happen. We do have materials on our website at denvergov.org/immigrant supports that has information about how people should know their own rights, who they should respond to or not respond to, what their options are in terms of what may happen. We don't know yet what the new administration is going to do. We don't know if they will target uh, individuals house by house, if they will target workforces or schools or houses or hospitals. But until we know more, we can't give more guidance. But I think we know it's a scary time. We also know that we have a lot of people that are working hard and playing by the rules. And we think people that are waiting on court dates deserve a date in court to have their asylum case heard or their work authorization heard. And we will fight to make sure they get those dates in court. And so we know it's an uncertain time, but we will be here for services and support regardless of what happens. And Denver is going to continue fighting to support all of our residents, regardless of what federal administration may take over.
Quiero pedirle por último, para cerrar mi entrevista, y es si puede dejarle un mensaje en español a todas esas familias que están aterradas con las políticas que se vienen en este momento y que se encuentran aquí en Denver.
Gracias y gracias a todas las familias que están escuchando. Ah, Estoy alegre de que ustedes viven aquí en Denver. Somos todavía una ciudad de bienvenida y vamos a quedar así. Entonces, quiero decir a todos, yo sé que eso es un tiempo asustado, donde hay muchas preguntas y no sabemos lo que va a pasar. Yo quiero que ustedes saben que vamos a hacer todo lo que podemos para ayudar gente aquí, para quedarle seguros y para darles servicios que necesitan. No vamos a hacer el trabajo de ICE por ellos, no vamos a ayudar a ellos con redadas o otras cosas y vamos a proteger uh, los lugares sensitivos que creemos que debe ser protegido como iglesias y escuelas y hospitales. Creemos que gente que ya están esperando por TPS o CBP1 o asilio no deben ser llevados después del país y vamos a trabajar para apoyar a ellos también. Pero creemos que puedes recibir más información de la ciudad en nuestro website denvergov.org/immigrant supports. Pero estamos aquí con ustedes mano a mano para trabajar juntos, para proteger a todos y gracias por viviendo aquí en Denver.
And first, we really appreciate the 4-point document that your office has sent out about protecting the immigrants and so on. I would say that was before President Trump took office on Monday, and it is a fast-moving situation. So a lot of things have changed. For example, one of those points, and we very, very much appreciate this, what you have sent out and all of the efforts that you have made and that the city has made. One of them, for example, says protecting sensitive locations and immigrants with lawful presence. The sensitive locations, one of the, as I understand it, and I read it, one of the executive orders that President Trump has issued is that they are going to raid or go to these sensitive locations, including schools, which is astonishing to me because that is children.
Yes.
They are children, possibly churches, hospitals. So I am very, very surprised at that. With that as an introduction, from our point of view, Mr. Vasquez and myself and several others, we still think that a Denver DACA would really help address some of these matters that the Trump administration has issued through executive orders. And for example, one of the major issue for immigrants, I believe, is the fear of deportation. And if a Denver DACA, at least operating within the city and county of Denver, if a Denver DACA could protect immigrants, especially the young people, of course, because that is what DACA does, especially the young people, I think that would go a long way toward helping the immigrant communities.
Yeah, Luis, let me ask you a question on this because you and I have talked about this before, and I was curious. I was thinking about you when we saw the changes that were proposed this week. My concern about this is, if I understand your plan correctly from when we talked the last time, if we issued a Denver-based work authorization to someone as a DACA permit, our fear is that that would identify those individuals for targeting and deportation, and then for violation of federal law. And so we think it actually risks putting them in greater harm by doing that than not. What is your take on how those folks would be protected from federal action when we couldn't stop federal action to deport them even with a Denver work permit?
Well, that's a very good question, a very significant matter. Surveillance comes in many forms for these families. I've read recent research about surveillance, how often immigrants are surveilled. That's the term, surveilled. And I think if it really gets down to it, that ICE and the rest of the administration, the Trump administration would want to specifically find immigrants, especially again young people, for DACA consideration, unfortunately, they could probably do that. In terms of DACA, I personally, and we would leave it up, we would leave it up to the individual applicants and their families to consider whether they should take that chance, that risk, and I do think it is a risk. But on the other hand, I think the effort to prevent deportation is probably more significant to them. I'm not speaking for them, but probably as significant or more significant to them than what they know is already the case. I should say, Mr. Mayor, I don't know that I've ever mentioned this. I'm the son of an undocumented immigrant. I grew up fearful that my father was going to be deported. So I do understand that fear. By the way, I was born and grew up in Colorado near Denver. So that
We're
is
so
my
glad.
response.
Yeah, I've always been excited about your idea on this. I mean, I think when you and I talked, I was really hopeful that if Harris won, we could have had a real path at this, because as you know, the statute of limitations on prosecution to city employees for helping in work permit or to employers or employees was 3 years. And so our concern of trying something before the election was if Trump did come in, he could prosecute folks for it. I think the concern now is even if we were to issue a Denver-based work permit, the employees who took them would be targeted, the employers who hired them would be targeted, and the city employees who administered it would be targeted. And so I think it's hard in this climate with this administration to do that. But I'm very open to creative ideas we could look at on how. I mean, the executive order from yesterday makes clear they're going to arrest any mayors or governors who they see as resistant to their current deportation efforts, but they have a harboring charge they're going to look for anyone that they think is supporting or providing services. And so we're worried that even nonprofit partners could be caught up in that if they're providing services. So very open to creative solutions. I think I just don't want to put the folks we're helping in greater danger.